Attempt to tell you about my father, so instead, I'm going to tell you two stories. The first is 1930 in Cincinnati. There was a citywide photo competition to take the best picture of Abraham Lincoln, or a statue of Abraham Lincoln. Most of you are familiar with the statue in Lytle Park, which is one of the very few where Lincoln is clean shaven. So the conversation went like this. Dad said, I won. So he's 17 years old. He takes the trolley downtown. And I believe it was either the mayor or a major dignitary who presented him with the prize. I said, how much money did you win? He said, I didn't win money. I said, what did you win? A chicken. Alive or dead? He said, it was alive. I said, what did you do with it? He said, I stuck it under my coat and I got back on the trolley. But you're not allowed to have animals on trolleys. So the chicken started to make noises, and the people around him were laughing, and the streetcar conductor was really pissed off. And he said, who has an animal in here? And my father just looked at the ceiling, and everybody around was laughing. And the chicken kept making these noises. And then he stopped, and I said, is that it? He said, yeah. I said, what happened to the chicken? He said, we ate it. That's the first story, 1930. Now we're 1943. Dad was the sole support of his family. He had sisters, he had a father. His mother died in 1930, so the war was on, and he was working full-time as a photographer in Cincinnati. And he was drafted. And he was part of the photo reconnaissance. The U.S. Army Air Force had photo reconnaissance teams. I think it was, I'm guessing here, but I think it was around 200 men per unit. And I just reread his service record. So it started in Clearwater, Florida, then it went to Denver, he went to Denver, and then he ended up in North Carolina. And basically, my father was interested in three things: going to movies, women, and photography. And his diary goes back and forth among all of these things. So he had told me this one story about the photo reconnaissance. So, I mean, these guys learned everything. How to develop in the field, how to dig an 8-foot hole and build a dark room in the ground if you were behind enemy lines. They learned all kinds of things, and he was developing film till he turned 90 when I gave him his first digital camera, and then he shifted into the digital world. Meanwhile, Army, so he's being moved around. He was in the 34th Recon, and then they switched him to the 33rd Recon. And the diary ends with the 33rd Recon. He has almost completed the training. But the 33rd is ready to ship on a warship to the European theater. And this is not in the diary, but he told me this. He is then switched to the 34th, which is who he spent the remainder of the war with. The 33rd went across the ocean. It was shot out of the water by German U-boats. Everyone died. My father went 2 weeks later with the 34th. They ended up in England. And what they did was they followed Patton around. And the pilots of this team did not have bombs in the bomber bay. They had cameras. And they would strafe over the English Channel 15 feet above the water to avoid German radar. And they would take pictures. Many of them did not make it back. But they would take pictures. They would bring back the pictures. The cameras were loaded into the bomber bays. And then 34th Recon would develop pictures all night, and they would have them ready for the Army in the morning so they could plan D-Day. And that's what these guys did. They developed, they didn't have guns, they had cameras, they had film, they had a dark room. So that's the second story. There are hundreds of stories, there are thousands of pictures. He shot for 80 years. I'm happy to talk to anybody when we walk across the street about his pictures, his life. He loved what he did to the very last day. The last picture he took, he died in Chicago, in 2008. He was at his 60-something reunion with the 34th Recon. My mother, was the first time he had not been with her. She had Alzheimer's. He left her in Cincinnati, and my brother met him in Chicago, and some of the last pictures he shot were of a blonde who was sunbathing on the roof of his hotel. And then he got to see all of his buddies, and he went to sleep, and he looked at my brother and said, it was after midnight, my brother had come in from friends, and he said, just remember, get sleep because we have a lot to do tomorrow. And he went to bed, and in seconds he died. And he had this fabulous life that he loved every minute of it. So those are my stories. Please look at the photos. Thank you, everybody.
Great stories. All wonderful stories for the American Jewish Archives. So now we really